Hell smells like sulfur. I know that now. Knew it the second we hit the beach on Iwo Jima, February 19th, 1945. The smell came rolling off that island like something alive, like the earth itself was rotting from the inside out. Sulfur and death. That's what Iwo Jima was. They told us it would take 3 days. 3 days to secure an island 8 square miles. They said the pre-invasion bombardment had done its job, that the Japs were finished, that we'd walk right through them. 36 days later, we were still there, still fighting, still dying. My name is Corporal James Delaney, 28th Marines, 5th Marine Division. I was 23 years old when I landed on Iwo. I'd been in the Pacific for 2 years by then, Bougainville, Guam, seen my share of action, thought I knew what combat was. Iwo taught me different. The smell hit us before we even reached the beach. We were in the Higgins boats, waves crashing over the sides, everyone green and seasick, clutching our rifles. And underneath the salt spray and diesel fuel and vomit, there it was, sulfur, like rotten eggs mixed with something chemical, something wrong. "What the hell is that?" Rodriguez asked. He was next to me, young kid from Texas, first combat operation. "Volcanic," someone said. "Island's volcanic. Got steam vents and hot springs all over." But that wasn't it. Not entirely. There was something else in that smell, something we'd learn soon enough. The ramp dropped. We poured out into knee-deep water, black volcanic sand sucking at our boots. The beach was gray-black, like ashes, and it moved under your feet. You'd take a step and sink 6 inches. Try to run and you'd fall on your face. And the smell was everywhere. Choking, sulfurous. It got in your nose, your throat, your lungs. Made your eyes water. Made you want to gag. We started moving inland. The beach was quiet, too quiet. We'd been told to expect immediate resistance, but there was nothing. Just that black sand and that smell and the sound of our own breathing. "Where are they?" Rodriguez whispered. Then the island exploded. They'd waited. That was their strategy. Let us land. Let us get packed on that beach. Thousands of Marines clustered together like cattle in a pen. Then open up with everything they had. Artillery, mortars, machine guns. Everything at once from positions we couldn't even see. The Japs had spent months digging into that island, creating tunnels and bunkers and firing positions deep in the volcanic rock. Our bombardment hadn't touched them. They'd just sat underground and waited for us to come to them. The beach turned into chaos. Explosions everywhere. Marines falling, screaming, dying. The black sand was wet now, not from the ocean, but from blood. So much blood it pooled in the volcanic ash, making it stick to everything. I hit the ground behind a terrace, one of the ridges of sand that ran across the beach. It was maybe 2 feet high, about as much cover as a curb, but it was all there was. Rodriguez landed next to me, his eyes huge, his breath coming in gasps. "We gotta move," I shouted over the noise. "Can't stay here." But where could we go? The beach was a killing zone. Moving forward meant running into machine gun fire. Staying meant getting hit by mortars that were dropping all around us. I looked back toward the water. More Higgins boats were coming in, more Marines hitting the beach, walking into the same hell we were in. I saw a mortar round land directly on one of the boats. Just obliterated it. Bodies and pieces of bodies thrown into the air. The smell was worse now. Sulfur and blood and cordite and something else. Something burning. Men were burning. The Japs had flamethrowers, or maybe it was our own, I couldn't tell. But I could smell it. Burning flesh. Sweet and horrible and mixed with that volcanic sulfur until you couldn't tell where one smell ended and the other began. "Move!" Sergeant Morrison was there, screaming at us, grabbing men and pushing them forward. "Get off this fucking beach. Move, move, move." We moved, scrambled over that terrace, and ran inland. The sand was worse here, deeper, softer. Every step was a struggle. You'd push off and your foot would just sink, like running in a nightmare where your legs won't work right. Private Collins went down next to me, took a round in the chest. He fell face first into the black sand, and it stuck to his face, to the blood pouring out of him. Turned him into something that didn't look human anymore, just a shape made of volcanic ash and death. We made it maybe 100 yards before we had to hit the dirt again. Found a shell crater and dove in. 6 of us. Me, Rodriguez, Morrison, and 3 other guys from the platoon. We pressed ourselves into that hole while machine gun fire cut the air above us. The sulfur smell was even stronger here. The crater was hot, steam rising from the ground. Iwo Jima was heated from below, cooked by the volcano underneath. We were fighting on the roof of hell. You could feel the heat through your uniform, through your boots. The ground was hot enough in places that it would blister your hands if you touched it wrong. Steam vents everywhere, hissing like snakes, pumping that sulfur smell into the air until it was all you could breathe. We spent the first night in that crater, couldn't move. The Japs had us pinned down, and anyway, nobody knew where anyone else was. The whole battalion was scattered across the beach and the first terrace, just trying to survive until morning. It was cold that night, bitter cold, the kind that gets into your bones. But the ground was hot, so you'd be shivering on top and sweating underneath, and the whole time breathing in that sulfur that made you feel sick and dizzy. Rodriguez was crying, quiet tears, trying not to make noise. He was 19 years old, should have been in college somewhere, chasing girls, worrying about exams. Instead, he was in a hole on Iwo Jima, covered in volcanic ash and blood that wasn't his, breathing sulfur and listening to wounded men scream in the darkness. I wanted to tell him it would be okay, that we'd make it through this, but I didn't know if that was true, and I wouldn't lie to him. So I just put my hand on his shoulder and squeezed, and he nodded, like he understood. The Japs attacked that night. Not a big attack, just small groups trying to infiltrate our lines. We could hear them moving in the darkness, could hear them talking to each other in Japanese. They'd scream and charge, and we'd fire at the sound, and sometimes we'd hit them, and sometimes they'd hit us. Morrison killed one with his K-bar knife. The Jap fell into our crater, and Morrison was on him instantly. I heard the struggle, heard the wet sounds, smelled fresh blood mixing with the sulfur. When it was over, Morrison was shaking so bad he couldn't hold his rifle. I felt his breath, he said. His voice was strange, distant. Right on my face. I could smell what he'd eaten. Rice, I think. Rice. Then he laughed, high and brittle and wrong. Rice and sulfur, he said. That's what death smells like. Rice and sulfur. He wasn't right after that. None of us were, but Morrison especially. Something broke in him that night. He kept talking about the smell, kept saying he couldn't get it out of his nose. Even when we weren't near the steam vents, he'd gag like he could still smell it. By morning, the beach looked like the end of the world. Bodies everywhere, equipment scattered, destroyed vehicles. The black sand was churned up like someone had plowed it, and everything was gray and black and red. The sulfur smell mixed with decomposition, with diesel fuel, with everything, creating something that had no name. A smell that existed only on Iwo Jima, only in hell. We pushed inland that second day, toward the airfields, toward Mount Suribachi, that dormant volcano that sat on the southern tip of the island like a crown. The Japs were dug in there, in caves and tunnels that went deep into the volcanic rock. Every position had to be taken with flamethrowers and explosives. Every inch of ground cost blood. The smell never left. Even when we moved away from the steam vents, it was there, in our clothes, our hair, our lungs. We breathed sulfur with every breath, ate it with our rations, slept in it at night. The island had gotten inside us, and it would never come out. They called the central part of the island the meat grinder. It wasn't hard to figure out why. Hill 382, Turkey Knob, the amphitheater, places that didn't even have real names, just coordinates and nicknames we gave them. The Japs had fortified every inch of it. Concrete bunkers with 6-foot walls, spider traps that would open up behind you, tunnels connecting everything so they could disappear in one place and pop up somewhere else. We'd take a position, think we'd cleared it, move on, then get shot in the back by Japs who'd come up through tunnels we didn't know existed. It took us 3 days to move 300 yards. Rodriguez died on day 12. We were assaulting a bunker, and he was right next to me when a machine gun opened up, caught him across the stomach. He went down in this little hollow between 2 rocks, and I crawled over to him. The smell there was terrible, worse than anywhere else. The hollow had a steam vent at the bottom, and it was pumping out sulfur so thick you could barely breathe. And Rodriguez was lying in it, bleeding out, breathing in that poison with every gasp. "Get me out," he begged. "Please, get me out of here. I can't. The smell." But I couldn't move him. The machine gun was still firing, still sweeping over our position. Moving meant dying. So I held his hand while he bled out in that sulfurous hollow. Held his hand and watched his eyes go dim while he gasped and choked on volcanic fumes and his own blood. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." He died with that smell in his lungs, with the sulfur of Iwo Jima being the last thing he ever experienced. I think about that a lot. Think about how unfair it was. He should have died somewhere clean, somewhere that didn't smell like the Earth's asshole, somewhere that didn't make death even worse than it already was. But Iwo didn't give you choices like that. We finally took the bunker with flamethrowers, burned them out. The smell of burning bodies mixed with the sulfur, and it was so horrible that half the guys were vomiting. But we kept going, because you couldn't stop. Stopping meant dying, so you just pushed the horror down deep and kept moving. Morrison snapped that day, started screaming about the smell, clawing at his nose like he could dig it out. Took 3 of us to hold him down. They evacuated him to the hospital ship, marked as combat fatigue. I never saw him again. Lucky bastard. He got to leave. The rest of us stayed, kept fighting, kept breathing sulfur, kept dying one after another in the volcanic ash while that smell soaked into our souls. They raised the flag on Mount Suribachi on day 5, February 23rd. We saw it go up from our position near the airfield, that American flag flying from the top of the volcano. The guys around me cheered. Some cried. It was supposed to mean something, supposed to mean we were winning. But the battle was less than a 1/6 over. We'd spend another month on that island, another month of dying. I didn't get near Suribachi until later, during the mopping up operations. By then, the mountain had been mostly cleared, but there were still holdouts. Still Japs hiding in caves, emerging at night to kill a few more Marines before they were killed themselves. The smell near the volcano was indescribable. Every cave entrance pumped out sulfur. The whole mountain was riddled with steam vents, hot springs, boiling mud pits, and there were bodies, hundreds of Japanese bodies in the caves, on the slopes, in the tunnels, decaying in the heat and the sulfur, creating a stench that defied description. We had to go into the caves, check them, make sure they were clear. I'll never forget the first one I entered. The sulfur smell was so strong it made me dizzy. The cave walls were hot to the touch, and deeper in, past the entrance, there were bodies. Japanese soldiers who'd been sealed in when we'd used explosives to collapse the tunnels. They died in the dark, in the heat, breathing sulfur until their lungs gave out. Some of them had been dead for weeks. Others were fresh. You could tell by the smell, by the stage of decay. The volcanic heat accelerated everything. Bodies that should have taken months to decompose were liquefying in days. I vomited in that cave. Couldn't help it. The smell, the heat, the knowledge of what I was looking at. It was too much. We pulled back, sealed the cave with explosives, left the bodies inside. What else could we do? There were too many caves, too many corpses. Iwo Jima became a tomb, a sulfurous tomb for thousands of Japanese soldiers who would never be recovered, never be sent home, never be buried properly, just left in the volcanic rock to rot forever. Sometimes I think about them, about those soldiers still in those caves. Wondered if the sulfur preserved them somehow, pickled them in volcanic fumes. Wondered if they were still down there underneath the airfield we'd built, underneath the memorials and monuments, still smelling that smell forever. The battle officially ended on March 26th, 36 days, almost 7,000 Marines dead, nearly 20,000 wounded, the entire Japanese garrison, 21,000 men, wiped out. Only a couple hundred taken prisoner. We'd won. We'd taken the island. But I don't know what we'd won. A volcanic rock that smelled like hell. An airfield built on bones and sulfur. What do you win when you fight in hell? It's 1956 now. I'm 34 years old. I work as a mechanic in San Diego. Got married in 47, have 2 kids, a house with a yard, a dog. The American dream, they call it. But I can still smell the sulfur. Not all the time, not constantly. But it comes back. At the strangest moments, it'll just appear, that unmistakable stench of volcanic fumes and death. I'll be under a car, changing the oil, and suddenly I'm back on Iwo Jima, breathing that poison, feeling that hot black sand under my boots. Or I'll be cooking eggs in the morning, and something about the smell will trigger it. Eggs, rotten eggs, sulfur. And I'm 23 again, watching Rodriguez die in that hollow, watching him choke on volcanic fumes while his blood turns the black sand into mud. My wife doesn't understand. How could she? I've tried to explain it, tried to tell her about Iwo Jima, about the smell that got into everything. But words don't work. There's no way to describe it to someone who wasn't there. No way to make them understand that a smell can haunt you worse than any nightmare. She thinks I'm exaggerating, thinks I should just get over it. It's been 11 years, she says. The war is over. You need to move on. But the smell won't let me move on. I can't go to hot springs, can't be around anything geothermal. We took a family trip to Yellowstone last year. The kids wanted to see Old Faithful. I lasted maybe 20 minutes before I had to leave. The sulfur smell from the geysers put me right back on that beach, right back in that crater, right back in those caves. I sat in the car and shook while my family walked around looking at geysers, and I felt like a coward, felt broken, felt like Iwo Jima had taken something from me that I'd never get back. Rodriguez died smelling sulfur. Morrison went crazy from it. Thousands of boys breathed it in as their last breath. It's the smell of our trauma, our death, our hell, and it's inside me forever. They're interviewing me today, asking me about Iwo Jima, asking what I remember most. They probably expect me to talk about the flag raising, or the bravery of the Marines, or the strategic importance of the island. But what I remember is the smell. That sulfurous, volcanic, death-soaked smell that turned an 8-square-mile island into the worst place on Earth. That smell that mixed with blood and cordite and burning flesh until it became something that exists nowhere else in the world. Something that lives only in the memories of those of us who were there. Sometimes I wonder about Iwo Jima. Wonder if it still smells the same. If the sulfur vents are still pumping out their poison. If the caves still hold their dead, if the black sand still turns to mud when it rains. I'll never go back to find out. Couldn't. Just seeing pictures of the island makes me feel sick. But I don't need to go back. Iwo Jima is with me always, in the smell of eggs in the morning, in the steam from a hot shower, in any moment when sulfur touches the air. Hell smells like sulfur. I know that now. Knew it the second we hit the beach on Iwo Jima. And I've been carrying that smell with me every day since. Every breath I take, part of me is back on that island, back in that volcanic nightmare, back in that moment when Rodriguez died choking on fumes and black sand. The battle ended in March of 1945, but the smell never ended. Not for me, not for any of us who were there. We came home, but we brought Iwo Jima with us, brought it in our lungs, in our memories, in every breath that carries even a hint of sulfur. Rodriguez never came home. He died in that hollow, breathing poison. But in a way, I never came home either. Part of me is still on that island, still breathing sulfur, still fighting in hell, still smelling death. And I always will be.